right. Get some other folks in here. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ginny, and I'm with Anderson's Bookshop. If you'd all like to, I've got everybody, our authors spotlighted here, so they will fill your screen. But if you want to keep certainly your microphones off, camera's kind of up to you if you'd like it on. Since we're spotlighted, it shouldn't be too distracting for the author, but if you'd like to turn it off, you are welcome to do that as well. We are really glad to have you with us this evening. We appreciate it and welcome you to this virtual event with Zibby Owens and friends, who I'll introduce in a little bit here. We're glad to have you all with us tonight. Thank you for taking the time to keep your eyes on yet another screen to talk books with us. For those of you who aren't familiar, Anderson's is an independent bookstore. We've been owned and run by the Anderson family for going on 6 generations now, selling books since 1875, actually, through the family business, the Oswald's Pharmacy. So your support is very personal and appreciated by us, especially in the midst of what's going on in the world. So we just like to take a minute to thank you for that. We really do appreciate it. Normally, we would love to be welcoming at least Zibby and hopefully some of the friends as well. I guess Sonali as well, since she's local to us, in person, along with over 400 other events during a year. But hopefully this virtual style will keep us all tied over until we can be together in person again, whenever that is. I hope it's soon. We're working on it, right? We're trying our best. We do have lots of other events, virtual events on our calendar for all ages and interests. So we'd love for you to check out any other ones that sound interesting to you on our website or any of our social media. A couple other upcoming ones. We have Jessica Zweig, which is going to be another great conversation. Michelle Borba and Anne Lamott actually was just announced. So please do join us for anything else that sparks your interest. But tonight we're very happy to be discussing Moms Don't Have Time To, a quarantine anthology, which is edited by Zibby Owens with contributions from many authors, including the 3 you see here. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce all of them. Zibby Owens is the host of award-winning literary podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, and a new podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Lose Weight. Zibby ran an author salon and hosted book fairs pre-pandemic. And during lockdown, she hosted, sorry, my thing went away. She hosted 2 Instagram live talk shows and started Zibby's virtual book club. She's appeared on all of the major news outlets, basically, and was dubbed New York City's most important bookfluencer by Vulture, and she currently lives in New York. And we're also joined by Alyssa Altman, who's the author of Motherland, Poor Man's Feast, and the James Beard award-winning blog of the same name. And Trafe, I'm sure I'm saying that incorrectly, My Life as an Unorthodox Outlaw. Was that good? Okay. Her work has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, The Guardian, New York Times, among many others. Her work has been anthologized in Best Food Writing 6 times. She was also a 2020 finalist for the Lambda Literary Award in Memoir and for the Frank McCourt Memoir Prize, which is quite impressive. And USA Today bestselling author Sonali Dev writes Bollywood-style love stories that explore issues faced by women around the world. Her novels have been in basically all of the Best Book of the Year lists, and she has won several awards. She lives in Chicagoland, and we like to claim her as Anderson's very own because she is right down the street from us and one of our good store friends. So welcome to you, Sonali. And Phyllis Grant is an IACP finalist for personal essays and memoir writing and a 3-time Savor Food Blog Award finalist for her blog, Dash and Bella. She has cooked in world-renowned restaurants, including Nobu, Michael's, and Boulay. I'm going to pretend I know how to pronounce that.
That's right.
Excellent. I'll fake the French accent. Her essays and recipes have been published in a dozen anthologies and cookbooks, including Best Food Writing in both 2015 and 16. And she is joining us from Berkeley, California. So welcome to All Full Review, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hand it over to you, Zibby.
Thank you. Well, I love that this is called Zibby and Friends because I am in such amazing company by the authors who are here with me tonight. And I am just like lucky to be with them because they've written so many awesome, great things. And I have like personal stories with each one of their actual books, but Phyllis Grant's book, Everything is Under Control, was what I packed as I left my house for the pandemic. It was like on the top of my bag. And I was like, I don't think everything is under control. I do not think so. And then Alyssa Altman actually edited like half the essays that were in this book and was one of the very first people to get involved in this project. And I am so grateful to her for all of the hard work she did on this project. So it's sort of a misnomer to say edited by Zibby Owens, but I'm more like, it should say like curated by or something like that because Alyssa did the hard work of the editing. And her book, Motherland, is one of my all-time favorites. It is absolutely beautiful. And we were lucky enough to get get to have a book event in person at my house way back in the day. So thanks to Alyssa for being here. And Sonali and I just got to get acquainted on Good Morning America. I mean, how often does one get to say something like that? So the producers of Good Morning America picked Sonali, and I said, fantastic. And we just met, but her book, Recipe for Persuasion, is the one that we talked about on my podcast, and she has since written others. And anyway, these ladies are amazing, and Renee Denfeld is still coming, but having some tech issues. So anyway, I just wanted to extend a huge thank you and welcome to Sonali, Alyssa, and Phyllis for joining me tonight. So maybe they can all just say hello and a few words and everything. Alyssa.
Hi.
I'm delighted to be here, and just an honor to be included in this wonderful anthology, and to have worked with Zibby on it, and just incredible writers and contributors, and to be here with Sonali and Phyllis. Just Phyllis is just, I mean, I think I've gone through 2 copies of Phyllis's book already. So, just it's delightful to be here. So thank you.
I feel really lucky to be here as well. And Zibby, I sort of feel like you've bookmarked this year for me in some ways, because one of my first events was an Instagram Live with you back in early April, I believe, right? And then the book club, and then this book. Not that we're at the end of the pandemic, but I just feel like there's a little bit of lightness and hope. And today, I was just telling people before we started that I had the chance to read Alyssa's essay, and Zibby's, and Sonali's, and Renee's, and they're just these beautiful nuggets that we all need right now. So it's an honor to be a part of it with my my cheese essay, because I wrote a lot about cheese. So thanks for having me.
Of course. And Sonali.
Yeah, as Zibby said, it was the most incredible experience. Getting to meet her, and then getting to meet her on Good Morning America was a little bit nuts. But it was. I know we're going to talk about our essays a little bit more, but I call this my feminine rage essay because it's been marinating inside me, I think, my entire adult life. I've written it so many times in my head that when I finally put it on paper, to have that go on to be part of this anthology, I think there's something amazingly special about that, because it wasn't just an essay that I wrote. It was an essay that I literally kind of, grilled up with my feminine rage for a very long time. So it's just something is magical about that being the one that this happens with. So this is incredibly special. And of course, Anderson's is my store. So it's all kind of serendipitous and beautiful. So thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. Well, Sonali, why don't you kick it off? And for people who haven't read Moms Don't Have Time To, which many haven't because of all the ridiculous shipping delays, including some of the authors. Sonali, why don't you tell everybody a little about your essay? And by the way, the people who are here in Zoom, you are more than welcome to turn your video on. You don't have to in case you're hiding something that you're doing, which is totally fine. But you're not distracting me, I'll tell you that much. And you're welcome to sort of interact with the authors and do whatever. So anyway, Sonali, take it away. Tell us about your essay.
Yeah, so my feminine rage essay. So my essay is really, it's called, it was never really about the dough. And it is my experience, or rather my relationship, my rather complicated and fraught relationship with making rotis, which is this leavened Indian bread that is part of, being part of an Indian or even South Asian family, where every morning and every day the women in the house make the bread. So it's a daily part of, traditional Indian family life. So that smell of, fresh rotis being made, because you roll them out and then you cook them on an open fire. And there's just something about open fire and dough and butter and all of that just has, these deep, this deep resonance, I think. But for me, growing up, it's it's also this competitive thing. It's also this thing that makes you a woman, makes you ready to be a wife. It's just this fraught thing that's kind of so tied in with the patriarchy and being an Indian woman. And I think it just translates into being a woman in the world today, and walking that tightrope between personal freedom and expectation. And all of this stuff, always has been churning in my head for so long, but always, and every time I touch a roti or I make one, it just all bubbles up. And I would write this essay in my head every time I had to do anything roti related. And then finally, I wrote a book, Recipe for Persuasion, which was, set on a Food Network show and very deeply tied to food. And so when I was doing, essays as part of that publicity, strangely enough, this was an essay I just wrote down because the pandemic came and we were on, in quarantine, and I hadn't made rotis for almost 20 years. And because the stores were closed, I finally had to. And so it was this whole, again, as I said, serendipitous thing, the way that this essay even got written. And when Zibby, when we sent it to Moms Don't Have Time to, the blog, and they published it, it was a great moment. And then when Zibby asked to include it in the anthology, I was like, take my feminine rage now.
That is awesome. And by the way, when we were on Good Morning America, Sonali was talking about, the feminist expectations in her family. And I kind of echoed like, yeah, in my family, my brother and all the men got to sit and I had to clear. Anyway, my brother would like to weigh in on this, which is I only meant for big family gatherings, not like daily dinners where it was literally just my brother and my mom. He wasn't just sitting there. Okay, I was just clearing that up for the record. Okay, Alyssa, why don't you tell us about your essay?
Well, I wrote this actually in real time while my wife and I were trying to decide whether or not to bring my mother, who is the subject of Motherland, of course, to our home and to get her out of New York City, where she lives and is a dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker, to move her here to Connecticut for mercifully short term. And basically, it's a story about, having to feed someone who will not be fed and nurture someone who will not be nurtured. My mother has a history of sort of body dysmorphia. My mother has a terrible relationship with food. She weighs around 100 pounds on a good day. And what I did at the beginning of COVID was I would pack these coolers and I would schlep them down to New York and fill her refrigerator with them. And I would go back like 2 weeks later and they were all still there. All the food was still there. So it meant that, she wasn't eating anything. And of course, if I stood up, you would see that I am not 100 pounds. And I am, I am like her worst nightmare, being, she's this sort of hyper heterosexual glam queen who doesn't love food, and I am a lesbian food writer, so I'm her nightmare. I'm her own personal nightmare. So it was really about expectation and my wanting to feed her, my wanting to keep her healthy, and finally moving her up to Connecticut and producing all of these things that I thought would nurture her, like roast chicken and vegetables and all the things that I wanted her to eat. And she wouldn't go near them. And I would find, like, in the middle of the night, I would hear her tiptoeing into the kitchen and eating these really crappy cupcakes. And it got to the point where, I called her doctor and I was like, what do I do? I mean, how do I keep her healthy? And she said, just feed her more cupcakes. So it became, this running joke in our house that, if it's healthy, she won't go near it. And it's a role reversal. It's about role reversal and how what we think is nurturing and sustaining for us is not necessarily nurturing and sustaining for the people we love. and care about. And that's really what it's about. And she's not here. She's back in the city now. So
Anyone who has read Alyssa's book, like many of us did, and then read her essay, you understand this plight that she was in, like as if she was your best friend telling you about her mom. When she said her mom was coming to live with her, I was like, oh no.
No.
I mean, I'm sure your mom is, lovely and everything, but I empathized with you so much after your
I'll
book.
send her over, Zibby.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
I do have COVID right now, so if you wanted.
no.
Okay,
Thank
Phyllis,
you.
why don't you tell us about your essay?
Well, I actually reread it today because I hadn't read it since midsummer, I think. It's, I don't know about you guys, but I've had a lot of trouble. Well, actually, I've had no trouble falling asleep at night, but I've been waking up around 2, 3, 4 almost every single night in COVID. So what I found early on was a good way to sort of calm my nervous system and to slowly go back to sleep was to see myself cooking in my head. And the truth is I cook so much of the day anyway. It's sort of like if you spend a bunch of time on your telephone, on your iPhone, whatever. I don't know if any of you wake up in the middle of the night and you sort of see, you're sort of swiping and fingers moving. I don't know, just like you sort of get in that mode. And I think for me with cooking, the same thing happens if I'm assembling a lot of salads, if I'm doing a lot of baking. It's just the memory of the physical action of cooking. I find it really soothing. So in the middle of the night, I tend to assemble salads and tarts in my head. But I reached a point where that wasn't quite enough this summer to get me back to sleep. So in the essay, I write about how I started going back in my head to a trip with my family in the south of France from 2 years ago, where everyone would go off and do all their activities during the day. And I would just cook in this little kitchen in this small house. And I would just go to the grocery store and stand in front of the floor to ceiling refrigerators filled with French dairy, like every possible creme fraiche and yogurt and goat yogurt and so on. And I would buy a ton of it and bring it back and cook with it. So my essay really is about sort of how nourishing that was at the time and how somehow I was able to bring that into my head, into my dreams, into my body, and would calm my nervous system over the summer. I don't know what I'm doing now to get back to sleep. I haven't been assembling salads and tarts in my head. I've been doing a bunch of deep breathing in the middle of the night, which helps. So yeah, it was a total pleasure to write in this particular way. It's very stream of consciousness, actually. And in some ways, that's the only way I was able to write in the first few months of COVID. I really struggled with writing anything sort of practical and calm and logical and so on. So this was really just a stream of consciousness of what I do in the night to settle my nervous system and to go back to sleep.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. My husband Kyle is on this Zoom and he used to teach tennis for many, many years and still plays tons of tennis. And in the middle of the night, sometimes he swings and occasionally has like whacked me on the head with his forehand as he sleeps. So I'm well aware
Of that. That is so funny, sort of, I guess.
That's funny.
Come on, that's funny. I mean, I'm dreaming I'm playing tennis and literally I'll be like hitting forehand.
So that's Kyle.
Not intentional.
I say, by the way, for those of you who don't know, although I feel like I know most of the people on the Zoom at this point, and thank you all so much for coming, but all the proceeds of this book are going to the Susan Felice Owens Program for COVID-19 Vaccine Research, named after Kyle's mom, who passed away along with Kyle's grandmother in the summer from COVID and went through this horrific 6-week illness with his mother, who was only 63 and very healthy. And she ended up passing away tragically, and honestly just should not have died. Everything sort of went wrong in the hospital. And anyway, so that's why we're donating all the proceeds of this and started this foundation. So Kyle is here representing as part of this story of this book as well. So anyway, all right, sorry to put a pall over things, but this is the time we're living in. So back to middle of the night fantasizing about food. You ladies are amazing cooks. Well, Sonali, I can't say that about you because I don't know you as well, but I know from talking to Phyllis and Alyssa that they have so much cooking prowess and, you know, can make the most elaborate spreads. And I've seen from Instagram some of the things they cook, and I am always, you know, they are mouthwateringly good. I know it's hard sometimes to keep our focus in COVID, but tell me a little more about cooking in COVID. And I don't want to hear about sourdough necessarily and the regulars, but maybe some of the things that you've made in COVID times or during this pandemic that either you hadn't made so much before or that has become a new staple in your cooking repertoire.
I'll jump in. We have been, Susan and I have been together for 21 years. We just celebrated our 21st anniversary. And one of the things that we've always made probably at least just once a week is a really good roast chicken. And we do sort of a riff on Alice Waters roast chicken stuffed with tarragon and garlic, and we sort of nibble at it, for a few days, and we make stock from whatever bits we have left over. But so that's something we've been doing a lot of, and we love it. But one of the things that I was really surprised at is we started eating a lot of pasta again, and we're both we're not carb phobic, but we do watch our carb intake, and sort of that went out the window, and I'm also gluten free, so I'm generally very careful about what I eat, because the quality of gluten free pasta really runs the gamut. And so if you go to my Instagram feed, you'll see, tagliatelle, carbonara, and if I can't get to Via Carota in New York, then I have to sort of mimic it in my own home. So I've been doing that. Susan's a wonderful baker, and she's been baking a lot and leaving it on the doorstep of our next door neighbor's house, because there's just so much that you can eat. But the pasta thing really sort of surprised me, that came out of nowhere. So, but it's been great and comforting and lovely, and I'm not beating myself up about it. So.
Yeah, the interesting thing, you said how you're a cook and your wife is a baker. Not to keep taking things back to Kyle here, but when we first got together, I realized, we were playing tennis one day, and he talked about how, how he loved to cook and how he almost was a professional chef. And I was thinking, wow, well, that's amazing, first of all. And second of all, like, I don't really cook very well. I mean, I can follow a recipe because I'm like a reasonably intelligent person, so anyone can literally like follow the steps, but that does not make me a good cook by any stretch. But that I've always loved to bake. And he was like, oh, great, we have a perfect meal. And I realized I always think about that, because when I was younger, I always thought that you were supposed to try to find someone who had the same interests as you. Like, oh, like, you love to cook. I also love to cook. How fun. We're going to like spend the rest of our lives cooking. But as I've gotten older, and this is my second marriage, I've kind of realized, you know what, like the way to have it work perfectly is when one person has one strength and someone else has a complementary strength. So I feel like the meal is, an allegory, if you will, of the harmony in a relationship or something. So anyway, luckily he could cook, and we had way too much pasta. And in every bowl of pasta that Kyle cooked, he put an entire stick of butter. Hence, I started Moms Don't Have Time to Lose Weight. Anyway, Phyllis, how about you? What have you been cooking?
Well, it's funny you say not to mention sourdough, but I have to, just because my cooking hasn't changed much. In fact, I've been doing almost less cooking because my kids have been home and they've been doing more of the cooking. So I haven't been doing anything new. I've been stepping back and watching my kids cook. And that has been such a pleasure. And it's another thing I wrote about early on in COVID for Esquire. I wrote another, again, stream of consciousness sort of thing, like listening to my son running down the stairs, hearing him take the pan out, cracking the egg, making the omelet. But it was day after day, week after week, month after month. And he has been making the most beautiful omelets to see this evolution. And he's 13.
Oh,
But what's nuts is the day, what was it, the 6th of January when all that stuff went down at the Capitol? That's the day I started making sourdough bread. And I have not stopped, Zibby. I have not stopped. I just made my 27th loaf
Whoa.
yesterday, and I brought it to my parents today. And I'm following the, I interviewed a bread baker friend, and I've been following the Tartine book #3, and I've been doing the long fermentation sourdough, and it's been the most gratifying thing, partly because it is brand new to me. And I think I knew all along for years that if I ever started making sourdough bread, I would get obsessed. So I'm like everybody else, I'm obsessed with sourdough bread. But so that's been my new thing over the past just 6 weeks, and I love it. I love it so much.
I should not have said anything about sourdough. And P.S., when you were describing your son running down, I was like, in my head, I was picturing like this like 19, 20-year-old college age kid, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, wow, I wonder how old your kids have to be until they're downstairs making omelets. And then you said 13, and I was like, oh no, I have two 13-year-olds.
Well, I'm not saying it's calm, that it's quiet. There's a huge mess. It's dangerous sometimes, but I'm really working on stepping away, like being one room removed while he's cooking. Otherwise, I do hover. I say, be careful, watch out. I have a sponge in my hand. And it's just not helpful for me to be hovering. So I'm trying to let go. That's the next part of this parenting phase.
And how about you, Sonali? Aside from roti, what has come up for you in the cooking, in the kitchen?
First, I want to live close to these two because they make food and drop it off, which is my dream. So I do love to cook. Every time you do these events and they ask you what is the one interesting thing about you, one of the things I pull out is, that I can on the fly cook a meal for 50 to 100 people without kind of breaking a sweat over it. So, and I feel very, I guess my kids would say, Mom, weird flex, but it's so I actually really love the act of feeding people. I don't enjoy the chore of it day to day, which I'm sure we all get. But the strange thing about COVID was that right in the early days, when we were all in the house and literally like just the four of us, and I have a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old, so we're empty nesters. So they were all back, which was awesome. The best part of COVID has been, a captive audience of your own children, grown children who, have left you and they're back and you have them. It's been so lovely. But one of the things we started to do a lot of was watch a lot of foreign film and television. So we started binging Korean dramas and French shows and Iranian films and just Turkish soaps. It was this hunger for travel, because in 2019 we were in 10 countries, so we're big travelers. It feeds our soul, and I'm not sure if those two things are connected, but we were traveling through stories, and somehow it was really hard to read right at the start, and so a lot of we were consuming all these stories through the visual medium, and they were international. And then this thing started where we wanted to eat the food from these places. So it was really strange. Like we would do, and we're not that family, which is, it's really hard to explain. One of the things we started doing is, have a night when we watch Parasite and make Korean fried chicken. And so then we fell down this fried chicken hole. And it was, my son, who's 21, loves to cook, is really, really good at it, has been cooking since he was probably 10, with the whole burnt fingers while making pancakes and that whole thing. And my daughter, who is 19, does not. But he is, so he would be, the entire like Dutch oven filled with oil, kind of deep frying, double deep frying, making the gochujang, honey sauce, and kind of dunking the fried chicken in it. And there's some things really, and as an Indian person, where the appropriation conversation is such an important part of our family and, and our circle, it was almost this little guilty thing. I'm like, are we like doing something wrong? But it was so joyful to be able to do that, right? To make cocoa when you're, watching a French film. It was really strange, but we didn't kind of set out to do it. We weren't like, let's try this thing. It was that thing called to this thing, and these two things we loved just kind of came together. And so that was, and it was a phase, we made pozole, when we were watching, Mexican soap operas, and so telenovelas. And it was just, it's just been this strange kind of cultural thing for us, where we just, stories and food became, which is strange because my stories are so filled with food and I've never done this before. So that was our little, and I hadn't really thought about it until you asked the question. And I'm like, oh, we did this, which was pretty special, I think, and we'll remember.
Well, if you get to crossing Delancey, I can make you like some, order you some matzo ball soup and make you some challah or something. That's about as far as I go with the cultural food making. We're already getting all these great.
I just want to say, Sonali, I am coming over for dinner. Oh
You know what?
God.
Anytime. It's my favorite thing, Kyle. Just don't hit me with a tennis racket. Since you do that in your sleep.
I really like this question from Jessica Rotondi, who's here, and by the way, is also an amazing author. And her book, I feel like I'm going to get the name wrong. What We Inherit, is that right? Okay, good. Phew. Which was great. And she said, cooking is so often tied to caring for others. Is there a food you find yourself making just for you, not for a partner or a child, that you savor? Which I kind of love that question. This also sort of speaks to self-care. Like, are you actually making the stuff that you like? Are you making stuff always to please other people? I feel like what you cook is a reflection of sort of where your head's at, right?
I don't know. I discovered long ago the joys of simple poached egg on toast, and of course, the better the toast, the better the bread. The more delicious it is. But I also will slip into the kitchen, and I've never made like cheesy rice before. Is that like a thing that, and a restaurant, a chef friend of mine was like, yeah, no, we do that at home all the time, with leftover white rice and cheese, and it's crazy and weird.
What kind of cheese?
I'm sorry?
What kind of cheese?
Usually an aged cheddar, but nothing too, not like Neil's Yard, nothing over the top in any way. And it is really comforting and odd, but comforting.
Anything else that you guys are doing mostly?
Well, but I realize I think I've been pretty selfish for the past 18 years and pretty much cooked what I love and then just hoped for the best and served it to everybody, and it's gone pretty well. But if I'm going to do something by myself, it's Doritos and rosé. Always. I hide the Doritos in the pantry way up high in the back behind the almond milk. So I don't think I cook just for myself very often. So that's a good question, though. Really, I'm really thinking hard. Good question,
there's a comment here, Beth. I mean, not Beth. From Beth to Phyllis, with some echoes here, saying that you're reminding them of the Queen's Gambit as you're laying in bed cooking the way that she does on the feeling. Maybe you haven't seen it, but
I haven't seen it. I really want to see it, though. Yes, but that's next on my list. So yes, I've heard it's amazing.
No nodding, but yes, it's really good. But it's the same concept essentially. So now, do you have any go-to just for you? Not when you're, taking different cultures and just whipping them up in your kitchen for fun?
Yeah, no, what Phyllis said, I feel like my number one rule for cooking anything is that I have to love it, because I'm not, feeding people things that I don't love. I mean, we've had ingredient things that, we were talking about marriages, like that are the things. And both my husband and I will eat all vegetables, all meats. Like we're not picky in a way of saying I'll never eat green peas, right? We love it all, which is our problem. But I think that we have done things like he loved okra. I was kind of meh, but it's become one of my favorite things because we've figured out how to cook it, so we both love it. And so things like that have happened. I think when I'm by myself, my biggest thing is that I don't want to cook because I love things like avocado toast, right? Like that's just one of the most like I think I credit myself with discovering it before it became a thing. And I think there's a lot of people like that. Before it became a thing, we were all putting avocados on our toast and sprinkling it with stuff and thinking, how has no one discovered this yet, right? So those are the kinds of things. We used to make this thing called cheese toast growing up in India, right? Which everybody who grows up in India has this kind of machine that's almost like a panini press, but you hold it over the stove, over the fire. And, it's just 2 slices of bread with some melty cheese inside. And, instead of putting it in a panini press, you make it in this toasty toast maker. So things like that, which are not a full meal, are kind of real treats for me. A bowl of potato chips with ketchup on it, which everybody finds gross, but I think is one of the most, you eat French fries with ketchup. So this is just a crunchier French fry with. So I love to do things like that, which is just me and my little, thrown together food that's not a full meal. And I do it.
Well, I'm curious about people who are on the Zoom. If you want to type your favorite meal in the chat, I'm curious. I have to say, when I was in 2nd grade, I stole the class list from my mom and called everybody in the class to find out what they had for dinner the night before. So I have this fascination with what do people eat. So feel free to share what you're eating or what you had for dinner or something in the chat, and just enlighten us all. So cooking is one thing, writing about cooking is another. How you write about food is a unique skill that I don't know how necessarily you acquire it, but clearly these authors have acquired it. How do you learn how to write about food, and what do you think makes a great food writer?
Wow.
I'm just gonna jump in. I have said that that good, and I say this both as editor, as a longtime cookbook editor, actually, and also food writer, that good food writing is just good sensory writing. It's paying attention to the sensory experience in the same way that there's good gardening writing and there's good sex writing, and that it's paying attention to the sensory and translating that in a way that's universal. And so some of my favorite food writers are people like Claudia Roden, and whose kitchen I've never been in, but just listening to her, and listening to Sonali, I'm transported into their kitchen, into their experience. I've been a fan of Phyllis's writing for years, and so I used to go onto her Instagram feed just to watch what she was doing, and it was another way of translating the written experience into the visual. But it's the same thing. Anything that's universal, we all eat. Some of us cook and some of us don't, but we all eat, and that's what needs to be there, certainly for me.
How about you, Phyllis? And there's a request here to explain how you started your blog, Dash and Bella.
Oh, okay. Let's see. My blog, I started in 2009 in order to enter a competition for the movie Julia. I don't know if you guys remember that movie. So it was all about make Julia Child recipes, take some photos, write some stories. And I didn't have a way to submit it. So I started a blog, and I was like, what is it going to be called? Well, my kids are named Dash and Bella. So I just named it and then submitted it. And then I actually won the contest. So my first post was it was wild. It was like I won a Le Creuset that was like the biggest thing you've ever seen in your life, and books and aprons and dish towels. And it was like the biggest, most explosive start to a blog. It was so bizarre. And then I said to my dad, well, my husband's got a lot. I'm taking care of the kids. I'm totally overwhelmed. I can't possibly write a second post. And he said, find a way, just do one more, see what happens. And I did one more and I did another. And then years later, here we are. It's kind of wild, but it was a place to play, is what I would say, early on. And it was a great time to start a blog. There weren't nearly as many, and blogs, I don't know what you guys think about blogs these days, but they're certainly, I don't know, I have one that's still alive, and I keep thinking I'm going to inject it with life again because it's out there floating in the world. So anyway, I've just gone all over the place, but that's how I started the blog. And in terms of food writing, Alyssa, I love the word universal. I think I definitely, when I'm writing, I start from a place that's very specific, and I try to get to the universal, if that makes sense. So it's more about how are my feet connected to the earth? What are my collarbones doing? How warm is the back of my neck? I mean, I start with all these specifics, and then for me, it starts from a very physical place and all the senses, as you mentioned. And then often it is, as the style that I told you guys about earlier, the stream of consciousness. It's long, it's almost like vomited on the page, and then pare it down from those specifics to the more universal is what I found. So that's sort of the trajectory that I've used with my writing. And I find that the writing that I most often connect with has the combination of ultra specific details and the universal. So that's what I would say. I think in any writing, actually, for me, that's I respond to the most, when it sort of carries both of those things at the same time.
Are there any food writers that you really admire? Like, I know I love reading Ruth Reichel, and she's on like the top of one of my lists of memoirs that involve food, but they're not necessarily all about food. What about you?
Yeah, oh, she's fantastic. And Alyssa is an incrable writer. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
And I started reading a book this week, Kate Lebo, Lebo. Oh, Zibby, you're gonna love this book. It's I'm blanking on the name. Give me a second. I'll put it in the chat in a second. But it's does anyone know the book I'm talking about, Alyssa? It's like something that about fruit. It's like all about the elderberry, and it's this most incredible combination of memoir and science and history. And I'm really talking this book up, and I haven't even told you the name of it.
The Book of Difficult Fruit.
Thank you. That's it.
Yes.
That's it.
I'll drop a link in the chat.
That's it.
Excellent. Thank you. That's I'm pretty excited about this woman's writing. So, and her book's published by FSG as well, which is where my book was published. So it's always fun to read some other, they haven't published a lot of food writers. So it's exciting that they've been heading more in that direction.
Adding to cart.
Oh, she moves fast. Oh my God, I love it.
Oh my gosh.
How about you, Sonali?
So it's really strange how, I mean, I think the one most common thing I get with reviews of my books is don't read hungry. And when that happened with my first book, people started saying things like, it's such food porn and don't read hungry. And I was completely baffled. And honestly, I had this little, kick in my gut. It's an ethnic book, right? I mean, these are Indian characters. And so I almost had this thing that it's a romance novel. In fact, A Bollywood Affair is this over-the-top Bollywood movie style rom-com. And it was written to be that. And so there's a lot, and the protagonist is someone who was married really young. It's the journey of this child bride under all this crazy rom-comminess. And so I was like, there's all of this happening in this book, and yet everyone is focused on the food. And it almost struck me as something that was, that there was something going on under the surface, that was the piece that people were pulling out. And it felt like, Indian book, therefore, and so I was a little taken aback, but then my second book came out and people were like, oh, the food. And these were not books that I have since written books with protagonists who are chefs. And so when I thought about what was happening, I realized that there's so much in my own life where I communicate emotion through food. I nurture through food. We're first generation immigrants. We moved here for grad school. We've kind of found family. And a lot of how we've done that is through food, through sharing food, through feeding people. I've taken care of my sisters in-laws children, so nieces and nephews who've come here from India to go to college, and my home has been their home, and I have brought their home to them through cooking. So I had two kids under 4 and 3 boys in their 20s eating in my house every week. When I was really young and had a full-time job and was trying to have a novel published. So I've had this whole moms don't have time to decade where I was literally trying to be everyone's everything through food. And so it was naturally leaking into my stories, because so as far as the writing is concerned, I think that it's really about relationships and character for me. So even when I've gone in and written chefs, and I've written chefs in Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors, and Recipe for Persuasion, and one of them is a food whisperer. That's how he processes his word. That's kind of unfurling a person's character is what he's trying to do through understanding their taste buds. So it's almost like he can communicate with food better than he can communicate with people. So it's a character thing, right? It's learning how to go outside that and actually communicate with people. And in Recipe for Persuasion, she's a chef with an ugly relationship to food, because it is a thing that her father has used to control her. And now she's trying to save his restaurant. So it's, so my initial books, it was accidental because it was a piece of me in the books. And in my later books, it was, oh, I can actually do this. And this is a great device for stories to say what I want to say. So it really is about, so the food is sensory in terms of character. So I do a lot of how they feel about it at the beginning and how they feel about it at the end as part of that journey. So I've almost taken on this gift that the readers gave me through reviews, and it's become one of my favorite storytelling tools.
A little update from the chat in case people are wondering what everybody else is eating. My daughter says a good baked potato, FYI. Carol Orange, and you can tell who's a writer, not that I'm judging or anything, but she happens to be a great writer. Carol wrote A Discerning Eye. My favorite foods for the winter are Moroccan stews with apricots, raisins, almonds, and good old American ice cream sundaes. Which just sounded really good. Katie Cruz says she's a full-time healthcare worker and juggling pandemic parenting, so cooking's been rough. She couldn't be more thankful to have a Ninja grill and a crock pot. Beth Corso had jammy tomatoes from the Summer's Bounty last night with pasta and sausages, another Phyllis Grant recipe.
Nice.
Susie Yablonsky, a cocktail. Sorry if you didn't want me reading this, but here I go. A cocktail, an appetizer, and of course, some amazing chocolate cake, pie, cookie, or for dessert would be her perfect meal. And then congratulations to Jessica Rotundi, who's pregnant, and lately all she wants is an egg and cheese on an English muffin. Comfort food all the way. P.S. That's like the one thing I can make. So if you ever, swing by, I can make you that. Allison Hammer, another author, Pieces of Me, and her new book is coming out, or maybe I'm getting them confused. My mind is like a sieve these days. Anyway, Allison Hammer, also amazing writer, and was on my podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Lose Weight. Air fryer wings. She's obsessed with her new air fryer. It feels like cheating, but it's not. That's what she's having tonight. And Shelly Tatum, Kieran, frisee with bacon and a poached egg with sourdough toast. Oh my gosh. Did I not mention that I had a piece of pizza and that was it? And then somebody took Alyssa's cooking course. Where did that go? Oh, Beth also says since last March, she's attended Pandemic University with a curriculum of writing, spiritual, and food Zoom courses that she wouldn't likely have been able to attend. And while quarantining with her son, they cooked all but 40 dinners for the last 362 days. And she said she's transformed from someone who cooked good into a good cook. How cute is that? I love that.
Love it.
Thanks, Beth. Anyway, always interesting to hear what people are eating, a little glimpse into their lives. Excellent. If there are any other questions, you can add them into the chat. Anything food related that people have on their wish list, perhaps in restaurants, or a food item they haven't been able to get this pandemic, but that they long for. Mine would be from Susie Cakes Bakery in LA, which is like my favorite, actually basically all the food that I like in LA. But Susie Cakes makes this amazing marble chocolate cake that has a frosting that tastes just like my late grandmother's. And I don't know how they do it, but it just has that exact same flavor. And I like couldn't believe it when I first tasted it. So that's the food, and they will not ship no matter how many times I've begged them to do so. I even begged them to make me a wedding cake, and even my charm does not do the trick. So that's the food item I'm missing the most. How about you guys, if there's anything?
I'm missing. Oh, go ahead, Alyssa.
No, I think just going to one of our treats. Susan and I were married at Buvette in Manhattan, and anything that Jody Williams does, I think that she touches is just magical. And one of our favorite things to do is to go into the city and go to Via Carota, which is one of her other restaurants, and Rita Sodi's restaurant on Grove Street, and going there, having her pasta, which is much different than my pasta, and just being surrounded by other people enjoying her food. She makes these crazy things that are sausage stuffed green olives that are then rolled in breadcrumbs and fried and served warm. And they're just extraordinary, and like I'm sort of frothing at the mouth as I'm talking about them. And whenever we go, we go with a bunch of people, and we order like 3 orders of them, and they're gone instantly, and it's just wonderful, just really wonderful. So I'm foaming at the mouth, and so I'll stop.
Well, I miss being in New York City and walking and eating, and I miss that more than anything, I have to say. I mean, I don't usually go out to meals much at home in Berkeley because we cook so much. But when I do get away to eat, it's New York City. So Alyssa, you will, I know Cafe Luxembourg. I've been going there since I was 18, when I was dropped off by my mom at Juilliard. That was our last meal together. And so I miss going there, having oysters and French fries and an omelet with ham and cheese and a martini and the beautiful chocolate sundaes. And I miss the bodies and the noise and the bustle. I miss the anonymity of New York City. I miss just walking all day. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Let's go walk and eat in New York when I can.
I'll meet you there.
I can't wait.
Then you can come over here and I can make you an egg.
Yes, please.
I have to say, nobody in New York is walking and eating because of the masks and everything. I feel like very few people are doing that. And the health commissioner, I just happened to see on the news, just recommended that people in New York City start wearing 2 masks. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So I don't know how much eating on the go is even going on, but yeah. Anything you're missing, Sonali?
Cheesiest answer ever. I'm missing my mom and her food. My parents, and actually my mom and my mother-in-law both, our parents spend the summers with us. And of course we go back to Mumbai at least once a year. So there's a lot of, and when I'm, at my parents' house, And especially if I'm traveling too much in India and she doesn't have enough time to feed me all the things, then she'll do stuff like make me modaks, which are these complicated sweet coconut stuffed rice dumplings, which are only made at certain festivals. But when I'm there, she'll make them for breakfast just because she doesn't have enough time to fit in all the things. So I'll wake up to the smell of like brown sugar and coconut and ghee cooking together. So yeah, same, frothing at my mouth, and my salivary glands are going crazy. But I think the travel and the food that we've eaten when we travel, I would, at this point, I would literally like, eat my limbs to get to that, which is a terrible thing to say. I'm happy to stay home, but I miss my mom's cooking. I miss being fed, by people who love me. I really, really miss that.
Oh, there is so much about food and love that's all interconnected and hard to tease apart. Yes. Well, you guys, it's almost 9:30 already, and this hour has flown by for me, and hopefully the rest of you. If not, thanks for joining me on something that entertained myself. But thank you so much to all these amazing authors. Thanks to Phyllis Grant and Alyssa Altman and Sonali Dave. And I hope that all of you here will buy their books. And I know Ginny's put a bunch of them in the chat, but those books are all fantastic. And please go get them. And then, while you're shopping, you can pick up one of these. Babies, moms don't have time to, a quarantine anthology. Just give it as a gift or something. Anyway, thank you. And thanks to Ginny for having us.
Of course. Well, they'd pick up an extra copy, see, because, if they don't already have one from purchasing it from tonight, which, by the way, will be signed before she got COVID, Zibby sent over signed book plates. So if you purchased a book as part of your package tonight, then you will get that. We'll send you an email. I'll send you an email when those are ready to be shipped out. We do need a couple of days to get that going. I have another fun little treat for everybody that I will also email to you through the Event Combo website. Is we asked these lovely ladies to put together one of their favorite quick recipes and send it over to us, and we put it together in a nice little designed package. So we're going to email that file out to you with some really fun recipes that each of them submitted, so you'll have kind of a more tangible memory as well to tuck into that Moms Don't Have Time To anthology and pull out when you need a quick yummy treat. So thank you all of you for being here. Thank you to our wonderful authors and Zibby for pulling together such a great conversation. We really appreciate everybody's time. Everybody be safe out there and happy reading.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zibby. Feel better,
Thanks.
Zibby.
Yes, you guys too. Take care, okay?
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.